Welcome to Data Summit Connect and this morning's keynote talk on redefining business intelligence for real-time businesses. So I'm Mary D. Ojala. I'm the conference program director for Information Today, DBTA. And I would like to get started this morning with a quick video from Sumo Logic, who is our diamond sponsor for the conference. So could we roll the video? And we're back. Not sure what went on there, but we'll fix it. Don't worry about it. So we're now going to get started with our two speakers this morning. We are starting with Sumo Logic's Bruno Kurtic, who is the Vice President of Solutions and Strategy. He's been working on machine learning technology for a long time, lots of experience. And with Bruno will be Cal Patel, Principal Architect at Genesis. So Bruno, you want to get started, please?
Sure, thank you very much. Let me put up the slides and we'll get going. Thanks everybody for joining us today. My name is Bruno Kurtic. As Mary D said, I'm a founding VP of Strategy and Solutions at Sumo Logic. Sumo Logic is a cloud-native machine data analytics platform. And I'm joined here today by Cal Patel of Genesis, who's the principal architect there. And Cal and I will spend a little bit of time today talking to you about how digital companies can gain a continuous competitive advantage. And it's an important topic today because digital transformation is a key concern within the E-suite of many enterprises across every industry today. Digital transformation is not a fad that technology companies like ours have started talking about in the last 2-3 years. It's really been a trend that's been going on for many years, actually close to 30 years at this point, since the sort of introduction of the World Wide Web. And many industries have already transformed and are well into delivering products and services to their customers as digital business models through combination of digital and physical goods, services, and so on and so forth. Industries and other industries are also amidst that transformation, and so this process is going to go on for several more decades. And what's interesting about what's going on right now is you can probably name yourself many companies or industries that have been disrupted. You probably have your favorite examples, right? Mine are companies like Netflix that has completely obliterated an in-home entertainment model, right? That business model as of the last decade no longer exists. Companies like Airbnb, who is disrupting hospitality, very physical, infrastructure heavy business, a line of business or industry that is being disrupted digitally. Companies like Uber, disrupting transportation. But it's not just these technology companies and startups that are doing this, right? In every one of your industries, there are companies that are traditional companies who are reinventing themselves in order to either respond to a disruption or disrupt themselves. You know, companies in traditional industries like manufacturing, like Volvo Trucks, for example, who is really reinventing what it means to drive a vehicle and how the telemetry and digital technology inside of a car is able to help the driver, keep the driver safe, improve the experience. Companies like United Airlines, who are, you know, immersing you with the digital experience, not that just during travel, but before you travel, while you travel, and after you're done with your travel. So this is happening everywhere. And for the companies that are not going through this, it's a hard times, right? And you know what's interesting, to add insult to injury here, you know, we are now all in this pandemic, right? You know, I have my background here with the outdoors picture of the ocean because I keep wanting to be out, right? And I can. And so we're all stuck at home, you know, working from home, whatever it is. And the COVID-19 pandemic has actually created a discontinuity in digital transformation as well. Sumo Logic, as I said at the beginning, is a machine data analytics company. We help our customers collect data and telemetry from their digital infrastructure, their IT infrastructure, their applications that are serving their customers. And we wanted to see, is there a way for us to understand and assess what's happening to the industries around the world as a result of this pandemic? And so we wanted to look at a proxy of our own and see, like, what can we find? And the proxy we chose to do is we collect data from our customers. And our customers, the more data they generate, the more likely that their business is doing well or growing. The less data, if it's on a downward trend, more likely that they're sort of slowing down. And so we looked at the data right before the pandemic and through the shelter in place, and then right after, and found some interesting things. We found some things that you would have guessed, right? Industries that are very much physical, that rely on sort of human-to-human contact, really shrunk over that 3-month period before and right after the shutdown, which was expected, right? Everybody knew that, you know, transportation, logistics, construction, and other industries are going to slow down because we stopped doing all of those things. We also saw what we expected is that, you know, kind of digital media, entertainment, gaming companies are going to, you know, do really well there because, you know, can't go to the game, can't go to the movies. You know, what am I going to do? Pull up my iPad, watch a movie online, or, you know, watch a sporting event, you know, somewhere from around the world, or whatever it might be. And so that, as you can see here, in just a couple of months, like nearly doubled in the amount of sort of activity that we were seeing. What was more interesting is the fact that, for example, retail, which we expected would not do so well. We expected retail to shrink, right? Because, you know, we can't go to stores anymore. It was hard to kind of shop and do all of that, because especially during first shelter in place, people weren't going anywhere. But we in fact saw that this 9% jump in just those 2 to 3 months actually was higher jump than was predicted for that entire year. And when we wanted to understand why that was, we realized that it's because we as a company, Sumo Logic, has a little bit of a bias because we serve more of the digital retailer, right? Online retailers, because they're managing their online platforms for retail using Sumo. And what's happened there is, what we realized is they're actually gaining market share. And that also then made sense because, you know, the physical retailers with storefronts lost business because we couldn't go there. And we all shifted as humans. We still needed to buy things and get food into the house. We all shifted to the digital retailers, and those companies captured market share, right? And what's become evident during COVID also is that now what's happening is a lot of these trends of people switching their habits are they're gonna remain, right? When we open up again, you know, people are still going to continue doing some of these online things, digital things, and companies are now racing to either catch up with digital transformation, or the ones that have already been ready for it, the ones that are benefiting, those are also investing more because it is those investments are paid off. So when a company becomes digital, what happens is, typically what happens is, many of you have probably heard the phrase software is eating the world. They all become software businesses. It is no longer sufficient to simply deploy ERP systems or CRM systems, because everybody has access to those and tune into your business. Because digital is part of your business, it's digital is the product. Companies are becoming software companies in order to fine-tune their software and their digital experience to their business model and basically compete better in their industries, which means that everybody is becoming a software business. No longer is it just technology companies that are software businesses. It is now every business that's becoming a software business. And that's forcing a pretty major transformation for a lot of these companies. And many of your companies are probably going through this. I'll summarize it here a little bit to kind of talk about what does it take to really become an effective software business that supports a digital business model. So this is a big slide, but let's just kind of talk through this a little bit. The first transformation that has to happen, and has to occur, is the technology transformation. Companies have to adapt in order to be more competitive. They have to adapt and gain agility, right? And they're switching from traditional software development models into agile and DevOps, because that allows them to evolve their software faster. Meaning evolving software means that you're able to innovate faster, means that you're able to deliver new products and services faster, which means that you're more competitive. Moving from on-premise to the cloud does the same thing for hardware that agile development does for software, right? If you evolve your software every day, you also probably want to tune the hardware you use so that software can run most efficiently. So cloud enables you to do that. Cloud allows you to actually buy your hardware on a daily basis, change it, swap it, and evolve it, just like you evolve your software. And then switching from traditional architectures to microservices architectures in order to be able to scale better, to be more resilient, and again, to evolve your software much faster than you otherwise could be. So technology transformation is mostly centered around agility, right? It's not necessarily less complex or lower cost, but it gives you agility and an ability to compete faster with a digital business model. The second major transformation is data. Digital businesses use their data differently than traditional businesses. Data in digital business is real time. Everything is coming off of the customer-facing systems in real time, and digital businesses, the most effective ones, are looking at this data in real time to understand how their business is doing right now so that we can make changes and decisions in real time. It also has to rely on unstructured data. Structured data, the data warehousing model of the past, doesn't really work, because if you evolve your software, your products in a continuous way every day, you can't rely on having the data structures and tables and data warehousing systems and extract, transform, and load systems ready for all of that. So you have to find a way to tap directly into the unstructured data coming right off of the production line. And it also has to cope with the exponential growth in data, right? A lot of this data is what we call machine data. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And that data is growing at an exponential rate. Why? Because it is governed by the Moore's law. And Moore's law states that machines will increase what they can do in terms of processing power every 18 to 24 months. And if they're going to do that, they're also going to tell you what they're doing twice as much every 18 to 24 months. And that's an exponential growth rate. And the challenge that creates is that how do you deal with the economics, which is the third transformation. Nobody's budgets for data analysis or technology for that matter are exponential. So you have to switch into what we call a value-based model for economics. You have to find the right data in order to be able to analyze it in a way that actually returns a positive ROI. You still have to somehow make it predictable, even though you're evolving everything on a daily basis. But that predictability is always going to require you to still have flexibility in the way how you spend the money that on your data analysis, so that you can adjust and adapt from, okay, I have these products and these capabilities, 2 months later, I have something else. I have to be able to shift the funds and be able to analyze and spend the money in the most effective way. And all three things here then require a different way of organizing your teams, different set of processes that are typically much more cross-functional, that facilitate better collaboration so that you can evolve the entire business model as you need to evolve and respond to the market conditions. So these are the major transformations. What Kyle and I are going to spend more time on today when we get to our fireside chat is we're going to spend time on the data aspects of a digital business and how data can be leveraged differently to create competitive advantage. Now, what is this data? I talked about machine data and its exponential growth. But let's unpack a little bit like what this data actually is and how it's used. So this data that we are going to talk about today isn't just data that you might find in a data warehouse or in a database table, right? It's not just a record of something, a customer record or something like that, or a catalog record in a database. It's all kinds of data, and it's coming and it's generated from your IT infrastructure that runs your applications, from your edge infrastructure like content delivery networks. It's coming from your cloud deployments, from your containers, from your Kubernetes, from your software development pipeline, your CI/CD pipeline that's used to create these applications and push them into production. From your custom code, all of this data, and it comes in different forms, right? It's going to be a bunch of key performance indicators, key risk indicators, service level indicators. It's going to be things like events like, not just, hey, somebody created a purchase, right? But things like somebody logged in, somebody logged out, somebody failed to log in, or an exception was generated in the code and there's an error now in the application. That's also an event. Transactions, and when we talk about transactions, it's not just transactions like, okay, it's a financial transaction or a payment transaction. Everything is a transaction in digital software, right? Like if you're using your favorite picture site and submitting a photo to Google Photos or somewhere else, that is a transaction. Like you click a button on a website, you upload something, it gets indexed, it gets persisted. Those are all transactions, and you need to manage and understand how your transactions are happening if you're a digital business to measure and help and improve customer experience. And then it's also metadata, data that describes data, right? Things that tell you context about all of these bits of data so that you can apply those bits of data in some kind of a context depending on what you're using it for, right? For example, operational intelligence. A lot of this data is used by DevOps, SRE teams in order to ensure that the applications and digital services are healthy, that they are available and performant, that the customers are getting a good experience, that they're not waiting for pages to open too long and things like that. And that is a concern of a digital business officer or CIO. And so it is a concern of the business suite. It's used oftentimes for security intelligence by the security operations center teams or DevSecOps teams. And that is a concern, data breaches, DDoS attacks, all of that is a concern of the C-suite through the CISO and the CIO as well. And then finally, all kinds of telemetry about product that product managers and marketing people can use that helps improve the products and how you serve your customers. And that's a concern of a variety of executives in a company, like chief product officer, chief marketing officer, chief financial officer, ultimately, again, all rolling up into the CEO C-suite. Fundamentally, continuous intelligence is what we believe is business intelligence redefined. All of this is incredibly important to manage in real time as you build a digital business, because at any point in time, this information can help you avoid issues, improve how you serve your customers, and move forward. I'm going to quickly double click on some examples that Cal and I are going to cover some of these examples that are a little bit more kind of business oriented, right? So for example, we talked earlier about the technology evolution and innovation pipeline, which is essentially your software development pipeline. As a software business, every company invests heavily into delivering the software that serves their customers. And being able to continuously improve how you build that software, the rate and quality of innovation in your software development lifecycle, looking at how you're defining requirements, how you're coding, how you're submitting, how you're pushing code to production, how often do you break production through that process, can help you differentiate. There is a whole set of research out there that helps companies improve how to increase the rate of innovation, the quality of innovation, their software development pipeline, that actually makes companies differentiate and more competitive in their business. We'll talk about some examples there. We're going to talk about some examples about understanding customer behavior, being able to look at how customers are using your digital services in real time. Understand what they're doing, what they're buying, when they're doing it, why are they doing it, is going to enable you to serve customers better and understand how you can improve the digital services in order to serve customers better based on how the customers are behaving themselves. And last but not least is being able to understand the actual physical or digital goods, how they are actually being used in real time. Essentially, are the features that we're shipping discoverable? Are they well performing? Are they being used? Are they not being used? Allows your product management teams and development teams to really iterate and improve on a continuous basis digital services and products that you offer to your customers. So these are kind of some examples. We're going to go into much more interesting and key things that the Genesis Cloud team does, which I'm going to switch into now a mode where we're going to do fireside chat with Cal. So Cal, if you could turn on your video and your microphone, we'll transition into that. And while Cal is doing that, I'll just introduce him again. Cal is a principal architect and SRE at Genesis Cloud. And Cal, if you could please start by maybe telling us a little bit more about yourself and tell us about Genesis Cloud as well. And I will advance slides for you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Bruno. I'm Cal Patel. I'm a principal architect for Genesis Cloud. I lead both the DevOps and the SRE team for Genesis Cloud. A little bit about Genesis Cloud. Genesis Cloud is a contact center as a service offering. It's first of its kind. It's completely cloud native. We're 100% deployed on AWS at the moment. We are API first platform. What does that mean? That means anything we do is exposed through an API. So we have basic functions to advanced features. Everything's exposed through an API. The way customers interact with the product is through an API. So the UI for the product, the clients for the product, the custom clients that customers have built, they all go through the same set of APIs. So today, as we talk through, I'm going to be talking a lot about APIs, but that's really how we monitor how the product is behaving, as well as how customers are interacting with the product. So
thank you.
On the next slide, Bruno. This is a single deployment of Genesis Cloud. As you can see, it's a very complex distributed system. We're deployed across multiple AWS accounts and regions. There are 9 individual deployments of this picture. It consists of about 375 plus microservices now. And what you're looking at is every box is a cluster, which is made up of servers anywhere from 2. In some cases, it's 2 servers. In some cases, it's 150 servers, right? So each box represents a single cluster, and then the lines you see are the communication paths or communications between those clusters as they're processing data and features and things like that.
That's a really interesting visualization of a digital service. It really kind of shows what the relationships are and how complex this can be. Maybe you can help us understand a little bit the digital transformation journey at Genesis Cloud and kind of your business objectives and how you organize your teams around those.
Yeah, absolutely. So taking a step back a little bit, when we started the project in the early days, we knew exactly what we wanted to build. We knew we wanted to make it flexible, extendable, and easy to change as needed. So in the early days, it was a very small team, and it was very self-contained within this organization. So as we started maturing the product and we started evolving, we kind of grew the teams. And that's when we kind of came up with this team structure and responsibilities model. So if you go to the
next slide.
Yep.
Is this slide?
Yeah, this slide. Sorry. So one of the things we talk about here is the structure that we came up with is every team is going to be entrepreneurial and they're going to own the microservice that they build all the way through. So they're going to take it from a bullet point on a PowerPoint presentation to designing it, building it, running, supporting, securing, and owning it, right? So securing and owning it are the two big circles that traditional dev teams aren't really used to. And what that makes for us is securing it. We are PCI and HIPAA compliant. So what that does is there are a lot of security and compliance requirements that we have to make sure we follow. And since each team is responsible for their components, it kind of comes down to how do we scale out the processes, right? So in a traditional way of doing things, we would have manual processes to validate, does this change meet this requirements? Or did you follow this checklist before you promote your code? Or how did you communicate updates to documentation type of stuff? So what we had to do is we had to take a step back and question every part of the process and say, do we need this manual step? Can you automate it? If so, can we use the logs as an audit trail to auditors? And if so, what details do you need in those logs, right? So when we go to the auditors to renew our certification for HIPAA or PCI, what details can we provide? What logs can we provide type of conversation, right? So, but two things that stand out over the bigger picture over the last few years is frequency of change and actual scale of adoption of the platform, right? So frequency of change, to give you an idea, if you go a couple of slides up, Bruno,
Sure. Yep.
the high level overview of our dashboard for that one. This is a high level overview of type of things we're monitoring closely for innovation pipeline. And this is where frequency of change gets really important. To give you some context, I was looking at numbers yesterday and today. We're up to doing 30,000 builds a single day, right? That's 30,000 jobs a single day. And we do about 2,700 deployments per week. So things are constantly changing. And this does not include the changes made by the AWS platform or other platforms that we use to put this product together. So there's things are constantly changing, evolving. And then when you talk about the actual scale of adoption in the platform, adoption of the platform, it gets even more interesting. As you were saying earlier, there's the exponential growth of data, right? So
right.
When we started off, things worked really well because we only had 2 gigs to play with. Now, just last week, we had a single commit in one microservice that resulted into almost 3 terabytes of logs in under 8 to 12 hours, you know?
Yep.
So when you put it all together, it becomes really challenging. You know?
Just for context, 3 terabytes of logs is multiple billion records, right?
Yeah.
For people who might not be familiar with the sizes of this. So, several billion records additional just because of the deployment of a microservice. Cal, I wanted to see if you can share some examples of how you guys leverage data at Genesis Cloud, right? Clearly here you show, that you're managing and understanding kind of the evolution of your service and product and tuning that. And, you probably are using all kinds of KPIs to make sure that you are, keeping up that velocity. I'm curious, when you look at sort of the data that's potentially coming from your applications and services you serve customers, how are you leveraging those data sets to understand your business?
Yeah, so I mean, to be honest, it almost becomes finding a needle in a haystack, right? When you're dealing with that big of a data, so you have to have the right tools.
Yeah.
All our logs go into Sumo Logic. To give you an idea, as I said earlier, just a single change in a single microservice can result into a lot of details. So the first common trend is finding the needle in the haystack. And the second one is uncovering platform trends. And the second one is really where things get really interesting, and that's where a lot of new innovation is happening, right? This is where you see a lot of collaboration across different teams and different silos and different parts of businesses, to be honest. Initially, it used to be where it's the technical teams would look at this data to figure out what was going wrong, to help customers with support cases and things like that. And what we've seen in the last year and a half is you see product teams getting more involved in the conversation. So in some cases, actually, I would say product managers are watching dashboards more than the development team is. Because product teams are looking at how people are using the features, how they're collaborating, how the features are performing, what kind of configurations are out there. And they're trying to figure out what next set of features or how they should optimize for cost and improve the commercialization strategy of certain services and features or products, right? So those things have been pretty interesting. If you go on the next page, next slide, this is an interesting use case that product team has really taken to heart. It's the deprecation of APIs. So historically, we would send out notices on we're going to end the life this product or this set of features or this set of APIs. And then when the day came, we pulled the plug. And if you hadn't moved over, too bad, you have a fire on your hand, right?
I have experienced the deprecation of APIs before, unpleasantly.
So one thing we do is we actually have queries and dashboards internally. So we're constantly monitoring who's still using things that are about to be deprecated. And then we proactively reach out and say, hey, we're getting close to the deadline. How can we help you move over? And a lot of times you will find that it's not that customers don't want to move. It's the alternative approach we provided is not good enough, right? And this is where it allows us to have a more proactive conversation and actually collaborate closely with customers and make sure we have the right paths before we pull the plug, right? So that has really improved quite a bit. I do want to share one quick example of finding a needle in a haystack, because I think it's really important. So if you go on the next slide for me. So here's a good example where for a given microservice, it's doing 300 to 400,000 requests a minute. And from a high level, if you look, most of them are 200s. Most of the requests are successful. Everything's looking great, right? But then you see there are very few failures towards the bottom of the graph, and it doesn't really look like much, right? But then when you go to the next slide, it's a drill down view of those errors. And you see that pink lines popping up. So that shows that something did actually happen and there was an error. But a lot of times with our alerts and monitoring systems, they're configured on percentage of error or failures, right? So a lot of time, if it's a platform-wide outage, it gets addressed very quickly because people get woken up, the fire alarms are going off, everybody comes in, fixes the fire, off you go. In this specific case, it's a specific customer and it's in a specific group of users for that customers. So it doesn't really hit the thresholds to raise the fire alarms, right? So this is normally where we get a customer escalation that goes up the channel, comes back down, we start digging into it and we find, hey, there's really what happened here, right? And this is almost, like I said, a good example of finding a needle in the haystack. Because if you don't have the context of what you're looking for, you almost never see it.
It's really incredible to be able to understand this, your operational posture, your customer experience, not just at the level of everybody, but you can actually see what's happening to any individual customer in real time. You can set ways of detecting issues for individual customers, be able to respond to them proactively rather than reactively when they call you, just like you said, which I think is a fantastic fantastic approach. And at Sumo Logic, we serve lots of customers, and we do similar things to kind of address customer issues and monitor in a much more novel way than we used to in the past. I'm curious, Cal, if you can maybe spend a little bit of time telling us a little bit more about kind of what kind of KPIs might be interesting to the business from the perspective of what is the okay, this obviously matters to DevOps team and customer support. What might matter kind of bubble up higher to the C-suite that they care about?
Yeah. So it's actually just to kind of build on top of this a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So because we have this data and we have the tool available, so everybody in the company, in the organization, has access to tools like Sumo Logic, right? So when we have a incident, or when I talked about platform outage. When we have a platform outage, everybody's looking at the same set of dashboards. Everybody's looking at the same set of data, right? So when we're on the outage bridge, everybody's on there talking about the same exact thing. So one thing that's really important is it helps everybody get on the same page as quickly as possible. And then when we're trying to make decisions, everybody's looking at the same data. Everybody's looking at the same exact detail. So it really helps collaborate with executives and the customers on the field on what's going on.
Yep.
So one thing that is really important down that path is the blast radius monitoring, right? Because that has a direct impact on our business. Because if we miss our SLAs, like I said before, we are a contact center offering, and we have some critical workloads, like we have 911 services, we have healthcare services, we have suicide hotline type stuff on the platform. So when we miss our SLA, there are some serious consequences that kind of, So it's some very serious conversation, and it's really helpful to have the exact start time, the impact, how many users for how long, whether it was intermittent, whether it was not, and to be able to drill down to a specific request that failed that resulted into a downstream impact. I think having that level of visibility and data allows us to have a much more focused and productive conversation with our customers. And it really allows for a very open transparency in the communication channel, because without having the data to back you up, you can't. I've found that it's been hard to be as transparent, because without having specific data to back up every statement, people can take it different ways.
Yeah, fact-based for sure. Do you mind telling us a little bit about what we're seeing here? It looks like there's some kind of an impact or dip here.
So this is a good example of an outage. So I grabbed this dashboard screenshot. What you're seeing is whenever we have a little blip, in this case, it was a very small blip in the load test. Basically, anytime we have an outage, we recreate those in the lower environments, right? So what you're seeing here is a recreation of an outage we had a couple of years ago, and we're testing to make sure we don't have a regression. So we created the same exact incident with chaos testing. And the dip you are seeing is a drop in network connectivity, which resulted into networks, the communication paths dropping or failing, or being disconnected. And what you are seeing is in every graph, we could drill it down by specific connection, specific instances, specific users, and the specific functions of the application, as well as the endpoints. So we have some controls in place to make sure that we don't cause thundering herd or denial of service attacks on ourselves, right? So that's where you see the login failures or login denials, is if we have too many people trying to log in at the same time, we kind of say, no, we're over the limit, retry in a few minutes type of thing, right?
Got it. I just love the fact that you used chaos testing term during a data analytics conference. I just love it. Thank you for that. Cal, maybe to wrap up as the last question here before we go into a Q&A, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit maybe about how your sort of business side of the house, like maybe people who are on the product innovation side, product managers and others, are looking at this. Maybe share an example. I think we have one on the next slide to talk about sort of the product usage, user behavior, and things like that.
Yeah. So as I was saying earlier, there's definitely has been a lot of collaboration between teams and across different parts of business. So as we started talking with more data-driven facts, right? It got the wheels churning in other parts, other teams on, well, do you have this data? Can you tell me how much does it cost to do X, right? So one of the benefits is we're on AWS Cloud. So I could tell you exactly how much money I'm spending for every second, right? So I know a given cluster or set of services enable feature X, and I know how much it costs to run a cluster for per second, right? So now I can turn around and I could tell you exactly how much this feature costs in order for me to run. And then because we have the API usage on the other side, I could tell you how much we're making or what kind of revenue we're getting from that service. So it's really enabled a conversation across the business teams, the security teams for security posture, and then operations teams. This one is a very good example because as you see, there's a 30-minute spike. And as you go further in the day, that spike keeps getting bigger and bigger. Initially, when this happened, we thought it was a customer did something wrong on the platform, right? Because it was exactly 30 minutes. We thought somebody wrote a cron job to query data and probably had a bug. So started looking into it, and we realized that it wasn't really a customer, it was something on our side. So this is where it wasn't just the dev and the dev teams trying to figure out what was going on, but product team actually got involved, because what you're seeing here is the top panel is it's all the customers using analytics APIs during that time period. And the bottom panel is the actual API endpoints currently being used, right? So when you look at this, it's very clear that it's not one customer, but it's everybody. Everybody's using it as expected, and it's not something on the customer side because it's not a single customer.
Fascinating.
So this is where we had to get product involved, and we actually worked with product to figure out how we could optimize the feature and the behavior of the feature, right? Which is, do you have to give a report for X amount of time? Can it be smaller? Do you have to get this detail? Can we summarize the report, right? Does it have to query every 30 minutes? And then that conversation went into capacity planning conversation, which went into cost optimizations and other business intelligence conversations from there, right?
Got it. Interesting. We, these charts look familiar. We, on the Sumo Logic side, we also ourselves look at things like this, and sometimes we're really puzzled. Why is this happening? How could this be? And then, now that you have the data that's generated by your customers' usage, you can then go and figure it out to either improve it or fix problems that you have. And this is a very familiar. We actually had a similar example. Ours was at every 15 minutes, and we figured out exactly why that was, and we were able to actually tune the architecture and how the system operates and improve how we scale, but not impact our customers' usage at all. And so that's really fascinating and interesting. So Cal, thank you so much for these examples. I'd like to see if anybody in the audience now has questions. I'll stop sharing the slides here, but we would love to see if we can help people online with any answers.
Okay, yeah, before we get to questions and answers, there was one comment in chat that I wanted to pass on. which was when Cal was talking about 30,000 bills and all those terabytes, and somebody in chat just said, wow. I love it.
I was saying it in my head as well.
Yeah.
You know, it's really is interesting when you look at kind of, you know, the Center for DevOps Research, which was acquired by Google recently. They publish what's called the DORA metrics that talk about what do the most effective, most efficient software development teams do and how often do they ship to production, things like that. They put out these KPIs, and I think Genesis blows those out of the water, right? And so you guys can all look up. We've actually written some blogs about that, so good on you guys.
Yeah,
okay, great.
absolutely.
Yeah, I'd love to hear if there are questions. I know there's some.
You have questions. We
Q&A.
do.
Awesome.
So let me start. This one is for Cal. Is Cal using logs to monitor? We use logs for troubleshooting. What would you say are the differences between monitoring with logs versus time series metrics? Cal.
Yeah, that's actually a very good question, right? And it's something that we reevaluate every few months. We do have our own time series monitoring. We use other monitoring products internally for that. The key is when you get alerted, your first thing is to go look at the events or metrics to figure out what's going on. But then to understand why that is happening, you kind of have to fall back to logs, right? So that's the common pattern. However, we have alerts purely on logs as well, because when you are at the scale, like I was saying earlier, you're looking for needles, but sometimes you don't know what needle you're looking for, right? So we have proactive monitoring that do like outlier detection or predictive alerts. So if we see something going in the wrong trend, like a specific error message is happening way too frequently, we'll proactively alert, or we'll create an outlier that says, you know, within a 15-minute period, I expect about 1,000 or 2,000 of this error messages. But if it goes outside of that range, I want you to proactively reach out and tell me. So we do a little bit of both. One interesting aspect is the volume of logs is also a good indicator of something being wrong. So if something's going bad, you're more likely to log more messages. So we also have alerts on the volume and how much log we're dating for a given time period.
Awesome.
So we have another one here. This says it's for either Bruno or Cal. What are some of the challenges that you've encountered managing cloud resources versus on-prem, and how has data helped?
Cal, why don't you go ahead and I'll comment on
it. So luckily for me, everything we do is in the cloud, right? So I have very little on-prem footprint, although I have done that in the past. So there are pros and the cons to both, right? There are some cases where on-prem is required and you have to monitor it. The biggest difference between the two is really how you manage the resources more than anything else, right? I've done on-prem deployments where if you have a good automated pipeline in place, it's not as painful. But if you're doing a deployment once every year, it gets very stressful and painful because, you know, there are a lot of changes going in at the same time. Also, how you approach the security posture is very different in the two environments. So it has been challenging and fun to come up with new approaches to do that in the cloud environment. As I talked about earlier, going after the compliances. When we first started, I remember conversations where people weren't even sure if we were going to be able to get basic SOC compliances, right? And now we have HIPAA and PCI compliance. So that has been a pretty fun journey along the way.
That's great. So I think that covers it. I'll just add that what's interesting about, so we are also cloud native, born in the cloud company. We help a lot of non-cloud companies out there run their services. And what we've discovered is that resources in the cloud, because there were a lot of them have evolved in the last, let's say, decade, actually more like last 5 years, come with a lot of data that is available to help you manage them. And so in part, if you're running in Amazon or Google or others, you actually can take telemetry off of these resources in real time, consider them, run them inside of your analytics tool, and then make proactive changes to those resources using technologies like serverless functions and others to manage your cloud deployments. And I think the whole stack was designed for automation, which allows you to then, the cloud stack is designed for automation, but allows you to do it much more programmatically rather than manually, which I think was more of the case in the data center. So that'd be my commentary on that.
Okay, we have another question here. Data governance and data quality. What are the challenges that you see in ensuring data quality in an organization? I'm not sure which one of you would like to take that one to start with. What is what?
Yeah, so I could give you my spiel, but I think we would have more color on that.
Yep.
So for us, from a governance point of view, we don't really hide any data. Everybody has access to all the data internally, right? So any team can go query any data they would want. The hard part has been how do we keep maintaining the tools and growing the storage as the data has more data comes in. For example, a query that used to take 10 minutes in 2 months ago now takes an hour and a half to run. So how do we kind of make sure the machine is well fine-tuned and well-oiled to kind of maintain the same level of SLA?
Sure. Bruno,
Yeah.
any comments about data governance?
Yeah, data governance is a huge, huge challenge for a lot of companies today, either from the regulatory perspective or from the quality perspective. And we are actually coping with a huge set of sort of external rules, how the data has to be governed. We ourselves spend a tremendous amount of effort on data governance, data compliance. We've spent, we've expanded into regions to where data sovereignty matters so that we guarantee that data doesn't move anywhere. We spend a lot of time on different regulatory bodies within regions, like, for example, federal government in the US requires very different data governance than the general purpose business. And so we have a federal deployment. We're going through FedRAMP for that. We've got, PCI compliance and various other things in order to help us and help our customers who use our technology safely use and send their data to us. So it's a major concern.
One thing I do want to add on that is it's much easier to do a lot of this if you thought about it on day one. It's much harder to do it after the fact. And that's a lesson that we're learning the hard way. Luckily for us, we had designed for this, so it's not that bad. So everything that goes in, we have hooks in place to do a lot of this. But if we didn't have those hooks, it would be extremely hard for us to achieve.
Okay, we've got another question here. Given that real-time data has given Genesys the ability to have more transparent conversations with both executives and customers, how has the role of Cal's team evolved at the executive level?
That's a good question. It's still evolving, so it's every day is a new challenge. Like I said before, it's one is how do you keep everything running, and as you have more data and as you start having more of these conversations, it kind of becomes the mindset that every conversation we're going to have same level of data and details available. So constantly we're having to go back and update code or systems to provide that data, right? So it's always trying to stay ahead and make sure we have the right information for the right people when they need it. And so my role is basically enablement, platform enablement now, more than operational or even software engineering or architect in the past that it was.
Cool. Bruno, we've got a question here for you. If you could talk a little bit more about what you meant when you said data economics was flexible?
Okay, so good question. So we, we've learned over the last few years sort of how our customers want to consume intelligence, right? What's really fascinating is, we kind of come from we are in the industry where kind of a lot of the pricing models and economics for data analysis are quote unquote one size fits all, right? What we've discovered, our customer base, is that what they need at the beginning of the year can be very, very different, at the middle of the year, at the end of the year.
Particularly this year.
Exactly. Things change so much, not just their internal technology and business models, but they change because of the external conditions, market pressures, changes in demand, all the stuff, right? And what they've told us is, I don't want you to give me, a one size fits all model. I don't want to license every product line and, get, I want this many gigabytes of that data and that many gigabytes of this data, and then managing. Basically, what they're looking for is a way to say, here, I have a budget, but that budget needs to be able to be applied in different ways as I go through my business cycles, as I respond to things outside. And so one of the things that I'll just talk about what we have done, and this needs to be done everywhere, I think, is enable our customers to essentially use the platforms like ours and platforms, other platforms that are data related, in a way that they can sort of shift what they analyze, how much data they analyze, where they apply those funds, whether they're spending a lot of time in operational side or security side or business side. Essentially, you need to be able to adapt, just like you're adapting your software and your hardware to your business model. What you need to be understanding in production, once you're actually running the business, will shift, right?
Yeah.
You'll need to be using different tools, different techniques, different technologies. And that's what I think the goal of the flexibility in those economics are.
Okay.
And we're learning as we go quite a bit of that.
Well, and I'd like to echo something that Cal said about this whole area is being challenging and fun. And I love it that somebody will actually say it's fun. I think that's wonderful. And I hope you continue to feel that way. And now I would like to very much thank Bruno from Sumo Logic and Cal from Genesis for this very interesting session. So thank you both very much.
Thank you for having me.
And
thank you for having us. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, great.